The Death Ray Blueprint. In January 1943, just days after Nikola Tesla was found dead in his room at the New Yorker hotel, agents from the U.S. Office of Alien Property moved swiftly. Within hours, his personal safe was opened, blueprints removed, and dozens of notebooks vanished into federal custody. But one term in the inventory list stood out: Teleforce Weapon Prototype. It was a term Tesla himself had used to describe a device the press had dubbed the Death Ray. Officially, nothing came of the confiscated materials, but some of Tesla's peers believed otherwise. The weapon had already been designed. Tesla first mentioned the device in the mid-1930s, claiming it could fire a highly concentrated particle beam over hundreds of miles with devastating precision. In a letter to the League of Nations in 1937, he offered the technology as a defense mechanism so powerful that it would end all wars. He claimed it could shoot down entire squadrons of aircraft mid-flight or incinerate targets instantly, without leaving any visible projectile. Tesla said it required no explosives, no fuel, only high-voltage electrostatic repulsion. His descriptions, dismissed by most as fantasy, were later found to contain extremely detailed schematics, including dimensions, voltage estimates, and directional focus modules. The weapon was allegedly based on 4 key components: a particle accelerator, a vacuum-sealed transmission chamber, a power generator capable of millions of volts, and a method to direct the beam without dispersion. Tesla's notes referred to the beam as capable of melting engine blocks at 200 miles and piercing armor as if it were paper. He proposed building it not as a portable device, but as a mounted defensive turret to protect national borders. He approached multiple governments, including the United States, United Kingdom, Soviet Union, and Yugoslavia, none of which are known to have officially accepted his proposal. Yet strangely, after his death, representatives from at least 2 of those governments requested access to his confiscated materials. The FBI's public records later revealed a report authored by Dr. John G. Trump, an MIT engineer and uncle of future U.S. President Donald Trump. He was tasked with analyzing Tesla's belongings and famously declared that there is nothing that would constitute a hazard in unfriendly hands. But that assessment has long been questioned. Trump was not a particle physicist, and his report lacked any mention of the particle beam device Tesla had referenced repeatedly in the years before his death. Years later, in declassified Soviet files, engineers working on directed energy weapons referred to a Yugoslav-born scientist who invented a non-nuclear energy system involving focused plasma. Some believe that Tesla's documents were duplicated before U.S. authorities sealed them. There were also reported sightings during the Cold War of unexplained directed energy bursts near testing ranges in both Nevada and Siberia. Witnesses described invisible strikes that left melted metal without signs of combustion, a description eerily close to Tesla's original writings. Even today, no official copy of the Death Ray schematic has surfaced. Its fate remains a mystery. Were the documents buried by authorities to suppress dangerous knowledge, or were they too advanced to be understood at the time? Perhaps the weapon was built and is still hidden within black-budget military programs. If so, it would not be the first time Tesla's ideas were adopted decades after his death and repackaged under modern names. One thing is certain: Tesla died alone and impoverished, but not empty-handed. He left behind visions of a future far beyond his time, and designs that some would kill to possess. The wireless energy transmitter. In 1901, on a quiet stretch of land in Shoreham, Long Island, a strange tower began to rise. It stood over 180 feet tall, crowned with a massive copper dome, nearly 70 feet in diameter. Officially, the structure was described as a radio transmission facility. Unofficially, Nikola Tesla believed it would become the heart of a global energy system. The Wardenclyffe Tower was never meant to transmit messages. It was designed to transmit power itself. Tesla's vision was radical, even by modern standards. He believed the Earth could be used as a giant electrical conductor. By injecting high-frequency alternating current into the ground at precise resonance points, energy could travel through the planet and be extracted anywhere without wires. In lectures and private correspondence, Tesla claimed that electricity could be drawn from the air using tuned receivers, allowing homes, factories, and even vehicles to operate without fuel lines or power grids. He called it a world system, one that would eliminate energy scarcity entirely. Funding initially came from financier J.P. Morgan, who believed Tesla was competing with Guglielmo Marconi in radio communications. But when Morgan learned that Tesla intended to distribute free energy without metering or profit, the funding abruptly stopped. Construction halted. Tesla was forced to mortgage the property, and by 1906, the tower stood incomplete, silent against the sky. What happened next would seal the mystery. After Tesla's financial collapse, Wardenclyffe was abandoned. Locals reported late-night activity around the tower, including unauthorized access and removal of equipment. Tesla later claimed that essential components and documents had been stolen. In 1917, during World War I, the tower was demolished under the pretext that it might serve as a navigation landmark for enemy submarines. The copper dome was sold for scrap. The laboratory was cleared. The original blueprints were never returned to Tesla. What makes the disappearance more troubling is what survived. Tesla's notebooks from Colorado Springs detail experiments where light bulbs glowed wirelessly at distances of over 60 feet. Metal plates embedded in the soil recorded measurable voltage differentials across miles. Tesla wrote of achieving electrical potentials exceeding 12 million volts and described stable transmission through the earth with minimal loss. These notes abruptly end years before Wardenclyffe was completed. The final calculations needed to scale the system globally are missing. After Tesla's death in 1943, agents seized what remained of his papers. According to later inventories, no complete plans for wireless power transmission were found. Yet the absence itself raised suspicion. Tesla had spoken publicly about the system for decades. He referenced specific frequencies, grounding methods, and receiver designs. It is difficult to believe that all detailed plans simply vanished by chance. Decades later, modern researchers rediscovered similar principles. Experiments in resonant inductive coupling and wireless power transfer now charge devices across rooms. Military agencies quietly explore ground-based energy transmission for remote installations. None of these systems acknowledge Tesla's original framework of planetary-scale conduction, yet the parallels are unmistakable. If Tesla's transmitter had succeeded, the global energy economy would have been unrecognizable. No centralized utilities, no fuel dependence, no metered consumption. Such a system would not only disrupt industries, but dismantle entire power structures built on scarcity. That possibility alone raises an uncomfortable question. Did Tesla fail to complete his greatest invention, or was it completed and deliberately erased from public history? The earthquake machine. In 1898, a small tremor shook the lower streets of Manhattan, rattling windows, cracking plaster, and sending pedestrians into a panic. But no earthquake had been recorded. Instead, the disturbance seemed to radiate from a modest laboratory at 46 East Houston Street, the workspace of Nikola Tesla. Later that evening, Tesla reportedly emerged, shaken and wide-eyed, clutching a steel sledgehammer. He had just destroyed one of his own inventions. It had worked too well. Tesla would later refer to it simply as a mechanical oscillator. The device was no larger than a clock attached to a steel beam in the center of the lab. It operated by producing precise, high-frequency vibrations that resonated with the materials around it. As the oscillator matched the natural frequency of surrounding structures, the vibration intensified. Tesla claimed that within minutes, the effect extended to neighboring buildings and even to the ground itself. According to Tesla's own account, it took just a few pounds of air-powered oscillation to generate seismic-level reactions in a city block. He realized what was happening too late and grabbed a hammer to destroy the device before the vibrations escalated further. Police arrived shortly after, responding to what residents assumed was a minor earthquake. They found only debris and confusion, and Tesla calmly explaining that he may have stumbled upon something rather dangerous. Tesla continued to refine the concept, theorizing that a sufficiently tuned oscillator could bring down steel bridges or even split the earth like an apple if allowed to run long enough. He called it teleseismic energy and believed it could be used for both construction and destruction, depending on how it was applied. However, no public demonstration ever followed. The oscillator was never patented. The original device, if it survived at all, was never found. What deepens the mystery is that Tesla did keep technical notes on resonance and mechanical vibration. But after 1900, those notes abruptly stop. Several engineers who later studied his work noticed gaps in the frequency progression tables, as if entire sections had been removed. During World War II, when Tesla's estate was confiscated by the U.S. government, there was no mention of any oscillator in the index of materials, despite decades of reference to its capabilities. Some researchers believe the earthquake machine may have influenced future military experiments. In the 1950s, the U.S. Navy explored resonant vibration to destabilize enemy submarine hulls. In the 1980s, rumors circulated of Soviet experiments involving vibrational energy to affect infrastructure. Neither program admitted ties to Tesla, but both described principles nearly identical to his own. The implications of such a device are staggering. A tool the size of a briefcase capable of shaking buildings without explosives or detection would be a dream for covert operations, and a nightmare if weaponized. It would also make every structure on Earth vulnerable, not through force, but through its own architectural frequency. If Tesla truly developed such a device, and if it worked even once, then what reason would governments have to let that knowledge survive? The answer may lie in the silence that followed: the Tesla flying disc. In the spring of 1928, Nikola Tesla submitted one of his final patent applications. Filed under U.S. Patent Number 1765114, it described a method of aerial transportation, unlike anything the aviation world had seen. While the patent illustrations appeared conventional, with side views resembling a biplane fuselage, Tesla's personal notes told a different story. Buried in marginalia were diagrams of a lenticular, disc-shaped craft, one that could hover, rotate, and maneuver without visible propulsion. Tesla believed he had created the blueprint for a flying machine that could defy gravity itself. The press never picked up the story, and Tesla never publicly demonstrated the design. But in several interviews near the end of his life, he alluded to a flying machine without wings, without propellers, capable of ascending vertically and remaining perfectly stable in flight. He claimed it used a revolutionary form of propulsion based on dynamic electrogravity fields, and that his system required no fuel, just electrical input, and a special configuration of metal plates to manipulate the surrounding space. Researchers later reviewing his notes found repeated references to high-voltage capacitive discharge systems and a rotating central column generating ionized airflow. Tesla also described a cockpit with concentric gyroscopic rings and a control interface responding to electric inertia. While much of the terminology was experimental or idiosyncratic, the principles echoed modern concepts of electrogravitics and plasma propulsion, technologies still considered cutting-edge nearly a century later. After Tesla's death in 1943, the FBI and Office of Alien Property seized all materials from his hotel room and storage units. Publicly, these items were reviewed and deemed non-dangerous. Privately, several documents concerning propulsion and aviation were classified and never returned. The original sketches of the flying disc, which Tesla allegedly referred to in correspondence as "my platform of the future," were not included in any released inventory. To this day, no copy has resurfaced. The story took a strange turn in the late 1950s, when a series of declassified military documents referenced experiments in electrokinetic aerial vehicles using disc-shaped hulls. One report from the Canadian Avracar project noted earlier theoretical inspiration, but failed to cite sources. Rumors emerged that Tesla's designs had been quietly integrated into post-war black projects, particularly in the Nevada test ranges, where unidentified aerial objects had been repeatedly spotted and documented. Further speculation came from multiple engineers within Lockheed's Skunk Works and Bell Labs, who independently confirmed that they had reviewed pre-World War II concepts of flying. Discs from Eastern European origin, terminology consistent with Tesla's Yugoslav heritage. Though none confirmed seeing Tesla's name directly, several described the engineering diagrams as technically brilliant but decades ahead of their time. Today, UFO sightings often describe craft with no wings, no visible exhaust, capable of sudden directional shifts and hovering in silence. While mainstream science continues to debate their origin, some see Tesla's early work as the missing link, not extraterrestrial, but suppressed terrestrial innovation. If Tesla's disk was real and feasible, it would mean that humanity had access to anti-gravity propulsion nearly a century ago, and allowed it to vanish into secrecy, not because it failed, but perhaps because it succeeded too well. The Tesla-Douglas anti-gravity engine. In 1938, a brief and cryptic entry appeared in the U.S. Civil Aeronautics Board archives. It referenced a confidential submission from Nikola Tesla in collaboration with Douglas Aircraft Company, an early giant in aviation. The document's title, Electrodynamic Propulsion Study, Phase 1. No full file has ever surfaced, but within the surviving correspondence from Tesla's final years lies a single phrase scribbled across the margin of a notebook page. Gravity is but a suggestion. According to accounts from former Douglas engineers interviewed decades later, Tesla approached the company not with blueprints, but with principles. He proposed a propulsion system that required no combustion and no aerodynamics. Instead, it manipulated what he called the spatial fabric through rapidly oscillating high-voltage fields. Tesla believed that gravity could be overcome not by brute force, but by creating local distortions in the surrounding energy field, what some modern physicists might now refer to as the vacuum or zero-point energy field. The core of the design was a cylindrical reactor with spinning capacitive layers, controlled by modulated frequencies. Tesla claimed the engine could create repulsion zones around a craft, allowing it to float, then accelerate with no resistance. He described silent flight, vertical lift, and a distinct lack of inertia during directional changes. These were not speculative ideas. He had already sketched the architecture decades earlier in his private notes from the 1890s, but lacked materials and support to build a prototype. In internal memos recovered years later from aviation archives, engineers described Tesla's ideas as mathematically perplexing, but not impossible. One note read, "The man has no grounding in modern physics, and yet his intuition produces effects we cannot model." Despite interest, Douglas never publicly acknowledged working with Tesla. Funding dried up by early 1939, and the project disappeared. Following Tesla's death, all materials related to electrodynamic propulsion were removed from his belongings by government agents. The FBI's inventory makes no mention of anti-gravity devices, and none of Tesla's heirs received records related to aviation designs. Yet fragments of this knowledge seem to have migrated elsewhere. In the 1950s, German aerospace defector Hermann Oberth hinted at earlier American work in field-based flight platforms. By the 1960s, declassified internal Air Force documents referenced advanced electrogravitic propulsion and field asymmetry control, theories bearing uncanny resemblance to Tesla's unpublished language. Even more mysteriously, Lockheed Martin's own white papers in the 1990s outlined a theoretical platform with fringe field drive capable of manipulating gravity-like forces. No prototypes have ever been acknowledged. One retired aerospace technician claimed that a prototype resembling Tesla's design was briefly tested at a military installation in the Mojave Desert in 1955. According to his account, the object hovered soundlessly before losing stabilization and dropping like a stone. No official record of such a test has ever been found. What makes the Tesla-Douglas anti-gravity engine so captivating is that it never required science fiction. It required only the willingness to look at gravity not as a law, but as a condition. If Tesla was right, then we have not been grounded by nature, but by our own decision to ignore what he tried to show us: the self-recharging electric motor. In 1931, a mysterious demonstration took place in Buffalo, New York. A modified Pierce Arrow automobile was seen driving for over a week, without gasoline, without visible batteries, and without ever stopping to refuel. The man behind the wheel was Nikola Tesla's nephew, Peter Savo. According to his later testimony, the car's power source was not under the hood, but in a small wooden box connected to the motor via simple wires. Tesla himself stood nearby, adjusting the box with what Savo described as tuning rods. The motor never overheated, made no sound, and required no external input. When asked where the energy came from, Tesla reportedly said, "From the ether all around us." The story was never confirmed officially. No photographs were taken. The wooden box vanished after the test. The Pierce arrow was returned to its original condition, and Tesla refused to discuss the demonstration publicly again. But for those who knew his work, the concept was not unexpected. Tesla had long proposed that the universe was filled with an invisible medium, not empty space, but a sea of dynamic energy waiting to be tapped. In earlier lectures and patents, Tesla described systems that could harvest ambient electrical energy, not through solar or mechanical means, but via high-frequency resonance with the surrounding environment. He envisioned coils and tuned circuits that could induce a current from natural oscillations in the Earth's electromagnetic field. He once claimed that every point in space contains energy, and that with the right configuration, a motor could draw power indefinitely. One of Tesla's final patents, filed in 1920, described an apparatus for the utilization of radiant energy. Though the language was vague, it referenced conductive plates, insulators, and ground connections designed to harvest high-frequency radiation. While not a full motor design, it hinted at a power source with no moving parts and no fuel, one that could theoretically drive a motor endlessly, provided it remained within a resonant field. After Tesla's death, no prototype of a self-recharging motor was ever recovered. The government's inventory of his effects makes no mention of it. Critics dismissed the Pierce arrow story as fabrication. Yet in the 1960s and 70s, several independent inventors attempted to replicate the concept, claiming to have briefly achieved over unity, where a device produced more energy than it consumed. All such claims were either discredited, shut down, or mysteriously abandoned. In the decades since, the phrase free energy has been relegated to pseudoscience, but recent developments in ambient energy harvesting, such as triboelectric nanogenerators and atmospheric voltage collectors, have begun to echo the principles Tesla described a century ago. The mainstream scientific community maintains that a motor cannot run without fuel, battery, or externally supplied current. Yet Tesla never claimed to break physics. He claimed to interpret it differently. If Tesla's self-recharging motor did function as reported, it would have destroyed the concept of fuel economy entirely. No more power grids, no more charging stations. Just a device, endlessly alive, drawing from the space we thought was empty. Perhaps it's not the absence of energy that limits us, but the absence of permission, the mind-to-machine interface. In 1933, amidst the crumbling economy of the Great Depression and growing global tensions, Nikola Tesla delivered one of his most cryptic public statements. Speaking to a small audience of engineers at the New Yorker hotel, he claimed to be working on a system that would allow the human brain to command machinery directly, without wires, switches, or spoken words. The remark was met with silence. No one asked for clarification. The technology was unthinkable. But Tesla had already been writing about such concepts for over a decade. In unpublished notes recovered from his correspondence with medical researchers, Tesla theorized that the brain produced distinct electromagnetic signatures for different thoughts. He believed that by isolating these signals and training a receiver to detect them, machines could respond to human intention in real time. He referred to it as a conscious resonance circuit. Unlike modern brain-machine interfaces, Tesla's proposal required no implants, only a sufficiently sensitive field receiver, tuned to the mental impulse band. In one letter dated 1934, Tesla described a prototype apparatus composed of a metal coil headset and a grid of tuned capacitors. The device allegedly translated cognitive intent into electrical instructions that could operate a motorized armature. He noted a series of trials in which the machine moved according to the subject's mental impulse, despite no muscular motion. No photographs exist. No witnesses were ever named. After his death in 1943, none of Tesla's papers included complete schematics for this interface. However, in FBI archives released decades later, a classified inventory listed a neural signal amplification device and cerebral signal recorder among the items seized. These were later described in official reports as non-functional experimental concepts. The devices themselves were never returned to Tesla's family, and have not appeared in any museum or collection. Meanwhile, starting in the late 1940s, both Soviet and American defense agencies began investing in research involving brainwave monitoring, neurofeedback, and remote behavioral influence. Project Artichoke, and later MK Ultra, attempted to decode and manipulate mental states using electromagnetic stimuli. Some of the earliest EEG machines bore a resemblance to Tesla's crude descriptions, although no attribution was ever made. By the 1970s, military research papers acknowledged the feasibility of non-invasive neural impulse detection for remote machinery operation. The civilian world would not see commercial brain-computer interfaces until decades later, but the groundwork may have already been laid, quietly, by Tesla himself. What makes Tesla's approach so disturbing is its simplicity. If the human brain can transmit intention, and if a machine can be made to receive it, then the entire chain of human action, touch, speech, motion, becomes obsolete. Thought becomes execution. Today's most advanced brain-machine systems still require complex algorithms, surgical implants, and artificial intelligence. Tesla envisioned none of that. He saw a world where consciousness itself was a frequency, one that could be tuned, captured, and directed like any other wave in the electromagnetic spectrum. If he was right, and if such a system was ever tested, the implications stretch beyond technology. They reach into free will, privacy, and the very nature of the self. And perhaps that's why it disappeared. The global power grid model. In a 1904 letter to his longtime friend and supporter, Robert Underwood Johnson, Nikola Tesla described a plan so audacious it bordered on delusional. A global system of wireless power, operating not through wires or transmission lines, but through the Earth itself. Every home, every factory, every machine, powered from the air, drawn from a single source. No meter, no control. Tesla believed it would be the great equalizer of human civilization. And perhaps for that very reason, it was never allowed to happen. Tesla envisioned a world where energy could be transmitted wirelessly across continents using a network of towers similar to the ill-fated Wardenclyffe project. Each tower would act both as a transmitter and a receiver, harnessing the Earth's natural resonance and atmospheric conductivity to circulate high-voltage current across the globe. In Tesla's own words, it was a world system capable of not just communication, but the delivery of unlimited electrical power to any point on Earth. In notebooks from his Colorado Springs experiments, Tesla recorded measurable Earth resonance frequencies and demonstrated the ability to light wireless lamps over 100 feet from the source. He discovered that, with precise timing and grounding techniques, energy could travel along the planet's surface like ripples on a pond. He believed the Earth acted as a vast conductor, and that with enough stations, a standing wave of usable energy could circle the globe. The implications of this idea were staggering and threatening. Tesla's documents include correspondences with financial backers in which he promises that power will be free to all men. When J.P. Morgan discovered that Tesla's vision included unmetered energy, funding was abruptly terminated. Without the ability to control or charge for energy, the project had no place in a world run by utility monopolies and industrial barons. Wardenclyffe fell silent, and Tesla never again attempted to construct a global station. But what happened to the design? In the years following Tesla's death, federal agencies confiscated hundreds of his documents. The official inventories made no mention of any global power grid, yet fragments of the idea reappeared elsewhere. In the 1950s, researchers at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory experimented with Earth ionosphere energy transfer. In the 1980s, the U.S. military initiated HAARP, a project aimed at studying atmospheric transmission using high-frequency waves. Neither program acknowledged Tesla, yet both mirrored aspects of his notes. A few years before his death, Tesla gave a cryptic interview in which he stated, "The Earth has its own heartbeat, and I have learned to tune to it." When asked about practical application, he refused to elaborate, adding only, "That knowledge must remain guarded." In recent years, low-frequency global resonance studies have confirmed the existence of Schumann resonances, standing electromagnetic waves within the Earth's atmosphere, exactly as Tesla predicted. But no system today exists to harness them for power, and none of Tesla's complete global grid schematics have ever surfaced. If such a system had been allowed to exist, entire infrastructures would be obsolete. Nations could no longer be held hostage by oil, coal, or even nuclear power. The balance of global power, financial and political, would shift irreversibly. Perhaps that is why the silence around it has been so complete. The thought control device. In 1935, during an obscure interview with a journalist from the New York American, Nikola Tesla made a statement that was barely noticed at the time. He claimed he had developed a system that could influence the human mind remotely using precisely tuned electromagnetic fields. The press, fascinated with his other inventions, ignored the comment. But buried in Tesla's personal writings, discovered only after his death, were chilling sketches of a device labeled psychotronic oscillator. What he was describing was nothing short of wireless thought manipulation. Tesla had long studied the effects of electrical fields on the human body. As early as the 1890s, he had demonstrated the ability to pass current through his body harmlessly, light bulbs with his fingers, and generate high-frequency fields that caused metallic objects to vibrate. But he also noted strange physiological and psychological effects: disorientation, mood changes, even auditory hallucinations. He believed the brain operated as a kind of receiver, tuned to the electromagnetic environment. In notebooks now held in private collections, Tesla wrote about experiments using pulsed frequencies to affect mental states of calm, agitation, and submission in animals. He hypothesized that each emotional state corresponded to a measurable frequency band, and that by broadcasting these frequencies from a remote source, one could entrain the brainwaves of a subject without their awareness. He called it induced resonance of neural oscillation. No functional prototype of the device has ever been located. However, in 1943, when Tesla died, government agents from the Office of Alien Property seized more than 2 trunks worth of papers and apparatuses. One of the items listed, and later redacted in public releases, was described as a compact emitter with field frequency calibration. Dr. John G. Trump, who was tasked with reviewing Tesla's materials, claimed there was nothing of national security concern. But in private, he told colleagues that some of the documents bordered on dangerous speculation. Following Tesla's death, interest in brainwave manipulation took a darker turn. In the 1950s, the CIA launched Project MK-Ultra, a clandestine program exploring mind control through drugs, hypnosis, and electromagnetic means. Declassified documents reveal multiple experiments using low-frequency radio waves and pulsed microwave signals to disrupt thought patterns. While these projects were supposedly unaffiliated with Tesla, their methods were uncannily similar to what he described decades earlier. In 1976, the Soviet Union accused the United States of conducting electromagnetic influence tests on its embassy personnel, a claim later supported by reports of dizziness, nausea, and unexplained illnesses. These accusations led to congressional inquiries and renewed public concern about psychotronic weapons. Still, no official link was ever drawn to Tesla. Modern neuroscience has proven that brain activity can be subtly altered by transcranial magnetic stimulation. Commercial devices now exist that enhance mood, focus, or sleep using targeted electromagnetic pulses. These developments have been welcomed by science, but they are fundamentally built on the idea that the human brain can be externally modulated without touch, sound, or sight. Tesla may have seen it all coming, but perhaps he understood the danger too clearly. In his later writings, he warned, "To command machines by thought is power. To command men by thought is tyranny." If his device ever existed, and ever functioned, then it was not just hidden, it was buried. The oscillating tower design. In the winter of 1903, as snow covered the quiet grounds of Shoreham, Long Island, Nikola Tesla stood beneath his towering experiment, the Wardenclyffe Tower, and spoke of something few understood. Not radio waves, not wireless electricity, but vibrations of the earth itself. He believed the tower could do more than transmit signals or power. It could create a resonance strong enough to alter the behavior of the planet's own electromagnetic shell. Tesla was not merely building a communication tower. He was building a global oscillator. The design was never officially completed. The tower, with its 187-foot height and massive copper dome, was dismantled before its true purpose was ever realized. But hidden among Tesla's sketches and experimental logs were fragments of another design, an advanced oscillation system built into the tower's foundation. Tesla believed that by tuning electrical impulses to the Earth's resonant frequency, he could send shock waves through the ionosphere, influence atmospheric conditions, and potentially trigger seismic responses. In his Colorado Springs lab, Tesla had already demonstrated high-frequency electrical discharges that produced artificial lightning and ionized the surrounding air. He recorded unnatural weather events during testing, sudden wind shifts, atmospheric pressure drops, and unexplained auroral patterns. In one instance, he claimed to have created a local weather disturbance that extended for miles. He began referring to the Earth as a living conductor, sensitive to precise energetic stimulation. Tesla's writings suggested that Wardenclyffe was the first of several planned towers, each intended to create a harmonic field between continents. He theorized that these towers could manipulate the Schumann resonance, the natural electromagnetic frequency of the planet. With careful control, he believed it might be possible to influence not just weather, but human consciousness itself, which he speculated operated in nearby frequency bands. After the tower was destroyed in 1917, Tesla's work on global resonance ceased. His notes on atmospheric tuning were never recovered. Following his death, none of the FBI seized documents mentioned oscillation fields or geo-resonant systems. Yet throughout the 20th century, similar technologies appeared under different names. In the 1980s, the U.S. government launched the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, HAARP, in Alaska. Publicly framed as a scientific study of the ionosphere, the facility employed high-powered radio transmitters to manipulate the upper atmosphere, much like Tesla described. HAARP's capabilities remain classified. But in internal communications leaked in the early 2000s, engineers referenced harmonic field testing and resonant response shaping. Independent researchers noted that HAARP's transmissions coincided with unusual cloud formations, rapid temperature fluctuations, and, in some cases, localized tremors. Officials denied any connection to Tesla's theories, yet the similarities are difficult to ignore. If Tesla's oscillating tower had reached its full potential, it might have given humanity the power to reshape its environment, to call rain, still storms, or even induce earthquakes. But that power comes with an unspoken cost. To vibrate the Earth itself is to touch the fundamental pulse of the planet. It is a force not meant for careless hands. And perhaps someone, somewhere, decided the tower had gone far enough. Conclusion. These 10 lost inventions of Nikola Tesla do not exist in isolation. They form a chilling pattern, one that suggests the systematic erasure of ideas deemed too disruptive, too transformative, or perhaps too uncontrollable. Each device, from the death ray to the oscillating tower, represented more than scientific ingenuity. They embodied potential, and that potential, to make energy free, to defy gravity, to connect mind and machine, threatened the very architecture of power that governs our modern world. This is not merely the story of one man and a handful of forgotten patents. It is the blueprint of a coordinated suppression. Tesla's notebooks were not lost in a fire or scattered by time. They were seized, categorized, sealed. His laboratory equipment disappeared under military authority. His name, once synonymous with genius, faded into footnotes, replaced by those more easily managed, more profitable, less revolutionary. The mechanisms of suppression are disturbingly consistent. Government agencies intervened the moment Tesla died. Witnesses were ignored or discredited. Diagrams vanished. The few documents that surfaced were fragmented or redacted, and all public interest in Tesla's most radical work was diverted towards safer narratives: radio, alternating current, fluorescent lighting. Useful, but incomplete, harmless. But if even a fraction of Tesla's lost inventions were real, the cost of their disappearance is incalculable. Free global energy could have dismantled the oil empires. Anti-gravity propulsion might have ended fossil-fueled transportation a century early. Mind-controlled machinery could have reshaped human potential and disability. And technologies like the earthquake machine or the death ray, terrifying in their scope, could have changed the balance of military power forever. Instead, each of those ideas was buried, not because they didn't work, but perhaps because they did. And the consequences of that erasure extend far beyond Tesla. The blueprint has repeated itself across decades. Visionaries vanish, breakthroughs are discredited, experiments are shut down. What survives is what can be controlled. What vanishes is what might set us free. Even now, modern innovators who attempt to build on Tesla's legacy face ridicule, legal obstacles, or mysterious disappearances of their own. The story continues, silent and invisible, behind the walls of classified programs and forgotten archives. So, we are left with a haunting truth. The question is not whether Nikola Tesla's inventions existed. The question is, why was the world not allowed to see them? And if the world still isn't ready, who decides what humanity is permitted to discover? Until those answers surface, Tesla's legacy remains not in what we've built, but in what we were never allowed to.